The Sacramento Kings get back on track with a blowout win over the Orlando Magic at home. I'm going to tell you what the most valuable part of this Kings win was. Plus, I'm going to be joined by Brenden Nunes of Kings Pulse right here from the Golden One Center to break down this game. It's all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. And I was getting ready to record Locked On Kings on the floor like normal. And I look over, I see Brenden Nunes getting ready to record Kings Pulse. And I said, you know what? Let's do it together. Let's combine. Let's do Locked On Pulse. Let's do Locked On Kings and Kings Pulse in a crossover episode together. So if you're listeners of both shows, and hopefully you are, hopefully this is a treat for you. It's definitely nice for me to have someone to talk to right after the game and break down the game with. So Brenden and I are going to talk about a ton of stuff from this Kings win tonight. We want you to respond. You can reach out to me at any time at MattGeorgeSac on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. But for right now, here it is. Brenden Nunes, Locked On Kings Pulse, joining me here for a fun crossover episode. So Locked On Kings was preparing to do a podcast courtside. Kings Pulse was preparing to do a podcast courtside. So we thought, you know what, let's bring it together. Let's cross it over. So we're sitting here on the Sacramento Kings bench. I'm pretty sure Brenden picked the seat that he's in because Keon Ellis sits here normally.
No comment. No comment. May or may not have been the joke.
Either way, sitting here on the bench, it feels like we could have joined the Sacramento Kings in their offensive showcase tonight. They win big, 136-111. And to me, Brenden, this is a needed, not necessarily breath of fresh air because it's expected in a lot of ways, but this is what we were looking for out of the Sacramento Kings during this homestand. You're on your home floor, defend it. It felt like the Kings got back on track tonight.
Absolutely. These last couple games had really been heartbreakers, especially that last loss to the Lakers, combined with the earlier games that we saw this season at home against Charlotte and Washington. Like, there have just been some tough ones that kind of had me second-guessing what this team really is, to be honest. And a big emphasis was protecting the paint. I think they gave up 78 points in their first matchup with the Magic in Orlando, 42 tonight, which was very clearly the point of emphasis for Mike Brown in his post-game presser. And it felt like we could have gone out there and made a three tonight. Everybody was getting theirs.
Yeah, franchise record 23 threes. I thought it was amazing that the guy to hit that franchise record was Matthew Dellavedova at the end, although maybe Dozier should have had the opportunity to hit it. His first basket as a King would have been setting the franchise record. But everybody had the hot hand. But we know offensively, Brenden, we know what this team is. We know what they can be. The fact that they scored 136 points just the other night when they lost to the Lakers, they gave up 136 but scored 134. We know offensively what this team can do. It's just being average defensively. It's if you allow 111 points, which I'm sure if you ask the Kings, they wanted to allow less to the Orlando Magic, but still, you allow 111 points on a consistent basis, the Kings offense is good enough to where you're going to win on most nights.
Absolutely. And that's been the case for most of this season. You know, I think that this is a team that they obviously should beat. But we haven't seen very many easy nights for this Kings team, especially throughout the course of these last couple of weeks. Their offense is good enough to win any game, but I feel like their defense is bad enough that they can lose on any given night. So tonight, only 4 3-pointers made for the Magic in that first half. They end up making 10 in that second half. But the Kings didn't overreact too much, did a good job protecting the paint. You just really got to take care of business in these games. They did that tonight. It's a little bit of a different one when you have this outlier shooting night. You can't rely on that sort of thing to happen night in and night out. But these next two against the Rockets are going to be big ones to kind of continue to prove yourself, win the games you're supposed to, try to solidify and make a little bit of a difference in this Western Conference standings. But defensive progress tonight, with the caveat of it being against a pretty bad offensive team. So hopefully this just gets spirits high, effort levels high, and you can keep rolling from there.
I feel like some people are going to diminish the takeaways from tonight's game because of the opponent. It's against the Orlando Magic, a team whose roster I think is way better than the way they play. I'm actually a big fan of the Orlando Magic roster. I think in a few years they're actually going to be a pretty good team in the Eastern Conference. But regardless, like in a lot of ways, the Kings did what they were supposed to do against a struggling Orlando Magic team tonight. But at the same time, there's a lot of progression over the course of this game. And one of the big things that stood out to me, we talk about 42 points in the paint. 18 of Orlando's first 24 points were in the paint. And you thought, oh, God, here we go again. Sacramento's not going to be able to stop anybody. The paint, it's open season. It's basically layup lines. And that's what it was for the first 5-6 minutes of this game for Orlando. So for 18 out of the first 24 to be in the paint and then to hold them to 42 for the game, that shows progression over the course of the game. That shows adjustments. And in-game adjustments are something that we're still kind of getting used to from this team because that's something that the Sacramento Kings have not done really at all over the last 16 seasons.
Absolutely. I think it's something that Mike Brown is very good at, and you can notice very clearly the adjustments that he makes throughout the course of a game. I thought there were some on the offensive end to take advantage of some of the things Orlando was doing defensively. But that was a great pull by you on those first quarter points in the paint compared to how they continue to progress from there. I thought that Keegan Murray has been a lot better being in that weak, that low man spot and kind of rotating over on the weak side. I thought he was great in that last game against the Lakers, actually, even though Mike Brown called him out a little bit for his rebounding.
Yeah.
And there was progress there tonight, but I thought that he's been a lot better there. And it's a team effort, you know, as much as like you want to maybe look at centers as the most important position defensively on the floor, like Mike Brown is always talking about. It's a 5-man effort. Everybody needs to be on a string, and I think we saw that throughout the course of the game tonight.
8 players finishing in double figures. Not something that happens very often, and when it happens, you almost need to win, right? And everybody was getting theirs from coming off the bench to all 5 starters, even if no player outside of Harrison Barnes, and we'll talk about Harrison in a little bit, had any kind of explosive offensive performance. But this team is consistently showing 6 guys scoring double figures a night. When they have 7 guys scoring in double figures, I don't think they've lost a game when they have 7 players scoring in double figures. What is it about this Kings team? And I've asked Mike Brown about this. I've asked Kevin Huerter about this. What is it about this Kings team to where so consistently they're getting such balanced scoring, and it's different guys on different nights? It's not always the same 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think Jordy Fernandez, when he took over while Mike Brown was unavailable for a little while, talked about the X factor being that you're always going to have Domas and De'Aaron getting their numbers and having their impact. But the X factor is you never know who that third guy is going to be. And sometimes it's very clear who it is. There's other days where it seems like it's just a combination of guys, kind of to your point here. And I think it just has so much to do with the ball movement that this team instills and makes one of their staples. 39 assists tonight on 52 made shots is phenomenal. And so many of their players are just extremely high IQ on the offensive end and don't force things. You know, I think of Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk, Harrison Barnes, obviously, Keegan Murray, and then your 2 stars in there as well. So I think just the unselfish nature, enjoying all of your teammates, wanting to see everybody else succeed, and the most important thing being the win, no matter who's putting up the points, helps contribute to that when you have a team that moves the ball as well as the Kings do.
And they really seem to feed off of each other, and it's not just the assist numbers that reflect that, but you see one guy get going. Tonight it was Harrison Barnes. We've seen Kevin Huerter get hot. We've seen Malik Monk get hot. De'Aaron Fox in the fourth quarter. Domantas Sabonis, just period. Like, we've seen guys get going. Terrence Davis when he dropped 30-plus against the Brooklyn Nets. And it's not just, okay, this guy's getting going, everybody give him the ball and get the hell out of the way. It's, okay, this guy's going, now let's all benefit from how well this guy is playing. And it seems like they really feed off of each other. Now, on the flip side, if a couple guys are struggling, everybody seems to struggle, maybe with the exception of Domantas Sabonis. He seems to be that kind of consistent presence offensively on a nightly basis. But it's very feast or famine with this Kings team, which is fun on nights like tonight where they're all together. But I still think this team has to figure out, especially when we get close to playoff time, if hopefully they're in the postseason, when some guys are struggling, others need to step up and fill that gap a little bit, or this team can be in serious trouble.
Absolutely, and I think it's hard to just be consistent on the offensive end of the floor overall. You know, you can run the same things, get the same sort of looks, but the variety on how often they're going to fall, there's just going to be a lot of variance night to night. You're going to have nights like tonight, and you're going to have nights where you just can't buy a bucket. Even with all the shooters on this team, I've been surprised how often that happens. Yeah. Nights where they're just really struggling to shoot, and I think that's part of the reason why Coach Brown is just so much emphasizing defense. To me, that's where you can be consistent. Yeah. You can make opponents get tough looks as much as possible. Sometimes they're going to go in, but it's just about, was the process right? And I think that's where teams can find consistency. I think that's part of the reason why we've seen this team be inconsistent throughout the course of this year. But we're definitely seeing progress. when it comes to Harrison Barnes tonight, 30 points, season high, 11 of 13 from the field. What were you seeing that allowed him to be successful?
Well, I mean, I actually asked him after the game because I was like, what goes through your mind when you're having a night like this? Because I think we've all had a feeling, whether we're like playing a pickup game or playing horse in our backyard, like, okay, shots are falling for me. I'm feeling pretty good. But to do it on the NBA scale, it's like, is this a mindset you bring into the game? Do you just have this feeling like, okay, everything I touch is gold? And Harrison had that night tonight where he was scoring on different levels. He was hitting a lot of threes. Some of them were in the flow of the offense. Another one was like a ball was knocked out to him, a deflection was knocked out to him, and he caught it basically, waited a couple seconds with the defender on him, and just pulled up, and it was nothing but net. Like, he had that kind of night tonight where it was just like, okay, I know I can get mine. Everything that I'm putting up is scoring. And to me, what's as great as that 30-point performance is, and when Harrison is scoring 30, you need to win. Like, you can't lose a game when Harrison Barnes is giving you that kind of output. But to me, what's more valuable from Harrison is that in 19 of his last 20 games, he scored in double figures. So you're getting now consistent offense on a nightly basis. Sometimes it's 11 points, sometimes it's 19 points. Maybe he'll crack 20, maybe he'll just be at 15. It doesn't always have to be the 18, 19 points a night for Harrison to be as effective. If you're getting that consistent offensive output from that wing position, you take that every single night, and a majority of nights when Harrison is getting going, the Kings are taking advantage of that.
Absolutely. I'd be curious to go back and look how many dribbles it took him, because it's so much just play finishing. He doesn't even have to do creating. I think De'Aaron and Domas specifically do a great job setting him up, and there's just no wasted motion from Harrison. He's such a professional on and off the court. It's great to see him continue to have these sorts of performances. And you know, once you reach halftime with Harrison, he's had a good game. I don't know about you, but sometimes I question, like, is that going to carry over into the second half? I think sometimes we see him sort of just get quieter as other guys tend to take over. De'Aaron tends to have quieter starts to the game and take over in fourth quarters. So I think it's just kind of the nature of how this team tends to go about their business on the offensive end. But to see him keep it up throughout the entire course of the game and just be as ridiculously efficient as he was, I mean, it was everything that you'd want to see from Harrison.
I don't know if it's fair to describe Harrison's on-court personality as passive, but he definitely is the type of player that doesn't mind taking a back seat for his teammates. And when he answered my question tonight about getting going, and one of the first things he brought up is the fact that his teammates were looking for him and how appreciative he was of that. To me, it's significant for Harrison to get into a mindset where he's like, you know what, I'm the guy tonight. It's me tonight. And that doesn't mean he has to take 18, 19 shots and play in isolation. He can play within the flow of the offense. And to me, that's extremely significant. So anytime, like, we can never accuse Harrison Barnes of being a selfish player. No. So anytime he's playing well enough to where he can say, give me the ball, or you should be trying to get me the ball. And it doesn't even take that. Usually the Kings are like, oh, Harrison's having a good night. Let's get him the ball. And we'll all respond to that. To me, that part of Harrison's personality on and off the floor is significant.
Absolutely, and it makes the whole question of what this deadline looks like for him all that more complicated, which I'm sure you've talked about, everybody has talked about for a couple deadlines now at this point.
Seemingly every year.
But exactly, and I'm sure it'll get revisited as we get closer and closer this year. But to hear him credit his teammates isn't the most surprising for just how Harrison goes about things. But I think it also is a credit to those guys to recognize that, like I said, sometimes HB gets a little quieter in that second half, but making sure that, like, it is his night. We are going to make sure to get him the ball and let him keep this rolling. And it turned out well. I mean, how often do you see a game where where De'Aaron Fox has 11 points and the Kings blow out a team?
Exactly, and that leads to me, the most valuable part of this Kings win tonight, and it's the fact that you won a game. You blew out a team, but it doesn't matter what the final score is. You won. You got a tally in the win column in a game where De'Aaron played less than 29 minutes, in a game where Domantas Sabonis played less than 32 minutes, and all 5 of your starters played less than 32 minutes. Over the course of an 82-game season, 82 games plus, hopefully 5, 6, 7 more this season in the playoffs, like, that to me is essential, especially with how many games we've seen Domantas Sabonis playing 40-plus minutes, De'Aaron Fox playing 38, 39-plus minutes. Like, I don't think we can undersell or underestimate the significance of getting wins over the course of a season and getting rest for your top guys in the meantime. It feels like a double win.
Absolutely. It was something you asked Coach about post-game, and I thought he had a great response just acknowledging how important that is. And you could just think back to the back-to-back they had one night in Utah, the second they come back here against Atlanta. Domantas Sabonis played just under 80 minutes in 2 nights. and the backup five has been an issue with this team. Chimezie Metu gave great minutes tonight, which I think is a big reason on why you were able to play Domas a little bit less than you typically would.
Right.
But you can't be understated how important it is to have a good performance, allow those guys to get a little bit of rest. I think just look at like Malik Monk tonight. I thought that he had a solid performance, and I think just allowing him to get that little bit of a rest from that last game is important. These guys are beat up throughout the course of this year. It's a tiring process, the NBA season. These guys take a lot of physical beating throughout the course of these games. So I think allowing these guys to get as much rest as possible throughout the course of this is extremely important, and obviously happened tonight.
And going back to Fox and Sabonis specifically, Fox would not call this a good offensive night for himself. I mean, he shot 5 of 13 from the field. We have higher expectations for De'Aaron, so we're not necessarily brushing that aspect under the rug because he tried to score more than he did. But De'Aaron finishing with 11 points, 9 assists. Domantas Sabonis finishing with 12 points, but 10 rebounds, 8 assists. Like, to me, it wasn't these two guys taking their foot off the gas pedal. To me, it was them recognizing the performances that Harrison Barnes, Malik Monk, their other players. I mean, even Kevin Huerter was shooting the ball really well to start this game. Keegan Murray, how well he was shooting the ball. Like, to me, it speaks in favor of the two of them when they can recognize when they're able to take a back seat, when they're able to, like, watching watching LeBron James play in person. He kind of has to be the engine and the guy for the Los Angeles Lakers. But what strikes me watching LeBron play in person, what strikes me watching Giannis Antetokounmpo play in person, is they play very rarely at 100%. Like, most of the time, they're coasting at 60, 65, 70%, and they're just damn good enough to where that's okay. They can still drop 30 points on 70, 75%. You don't see that 100% burst unless it's in a close game or every once in a while or in transition with a highlight dunk, they'll give you that burst. De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis almost have to play at like 85, 90% consistently for the Sacramento Kings to have a chance to win on most nights. So when they can dip down into the 60s, when they can dip down into the 50s and just kind of cruise and put up the numbers we know they're capable of and allow their teammates to carry the scoring load, that's not them taking a night off and reason to be criticized. To me, that deserves praise.
I'm sure if they could do it every night that they would.
Right.
You know, I'd imagine that it's relieving. We've seen De'Aaron need to go crazy in fourth quarters. He had that 22-point fourth quarter performance in Utah. As great as I'm sure that feels at the end of the night, he's probably exhausted. And then you have the second night of a back-to-back. Like, the NBA is never stopping. I'm sure that these guys love to see this sort of performance. And they both did their job on the defensive end. You know, like when other guys on the team are taking more of an offensive responsibility, it allows them to exert a little bit more effort on the defensive end. I thought De'Aaron had good moments in that second half. Domas has been really impressive all year, I've thought, defensively, given his limitations when it comes to typical size for a center. Didn't get in too much foul trouble tonight, so I would imagine those guys are relieved and clearly more than happy to share the spotlight and allow some of their other teammates to carry the scoring load.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax season, and this season, go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. You know, actual fun stuff. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. You can unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing not taxes a lullaby. Hope not taxes sleeps through the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes into the sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring that your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. It feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Now it feels good to actually do them. Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax. Full service products only. Video meeting while expert does your taxes is required. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. You brought up Chimezie Metu earlier. Chimezie's the backup center on this team,
He has
right?
to be, right?
I think so. I mean, just you compare him to what Rashawn Holmes does. You compare him to what we saw, a very limited burst of Nimi. We've seen very limited burst of Alex Len. Like, it's really Chimezie Metu versus Rashawn Holmes. And as much as I like Rashawn, I'm a huge fan of Rashawn, and I'm questioning why Rashawn doesn't provide that energy burst that Chimezie does. Like, to me, Chimezie, I know he's had lulls, but when Chimezie comes in and plays, he plays very, very well. Like, Chimezie has to be the guy unless the Kings upgrade the roster.
He's been the best option by far. You know, I think that we've seen like promising flashes from Rashawn or maybe a little bit from Nimi. Coach did mention pregame Alex Len is the one guy he feels like he hasn't given a fair opportunity, and maybe that will come eventually. But I like that they went back to Metu. I had been curious recently why that wasn't happening. I think that he's clearly been the best guy so far. Asked Coach a little bit about, what led to you going away from him. And he kind of mentioned effort. You're only playing 6 to 8 minutes a half during the time that Domas isn't playing. There's no excuse for effort to not be 100% all the time. And when Mezzi has 100% effort, just the size and speed that he has when he is performing as the backup five, he should be able to outrun everybody. He's a ridiculous athlete for the size he is, and is very skilled. So I think that if he just is able to play within himself like we've seen, the vertical lob threat that he provides, I think, is the unique aspect among the other bigs that he has, and one defensive player of the game chain. And I don't know that I would have expected Mezzi to win many defensive player of the game chains throughout the course of this year, but well-deserved.
We need to see the post-game photo or the post-game video, because Chimezie maybe is the best in the team at those pompous, aggressive poses. He had the cross arms, so I'm sure he repped the chain, I'm sure, better than Keegan Murray repped the chain when Keegan won. But like Mezzi, Coach Brown talked about the intangibles, right? The speed that he has, the athleticism that he has. But to me, when he plays with that max effort in those limited bursts, the numbers follow. And you look at the numbers that he had tonight, 11 points and 9 rebounds in 14 minutes. The majority of those points and rebounds actually came 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes into the game. He just got some little extra playing time towards the end when the Kings could shut it down when they were up 30 and people were chanting light the beam in the fourth quarter. So, to me, Mezzi's natural ability results in numbers when he plays as hard as Mike Brown needs him to. And I know Mike's not necessarily looking for offensive production from his backup center. He's looking for more defense from this team, period. But I look at Chimezie Metu and the energy that he brings off the bench to some extent the same way I look at what Malik Monk brings off the bench, which is instant energy that not only gets the team involved, it gets the crowd involved. And we've seen when this Golden One Center crowd gets involved, the Kings play like a completely different team.
Absolutely. I thought those guys have developed a pretty good chemistry earlier in the year, and then we didn't get to see that as Mezzi got moved to the bench and Coach was trying some other options. I think understandably so. But I thought that those two guys had developed a really good chemistry, and it was good to kind of see that get re-sparked tonight. I thought that Malik did a good job moving the ball, getting that bench involved, because there's been times where the bench has been a little underwhelming for the Kings this year, and having a performance like this, I think, is relieving. And if you can solidify who is playing in that back of five, which to me obviously feels like it should be Mezzi right now until proven otherwise, and I'm not 100% confident that he'll continue to prove that he deserves that spot 100%. There still could be question marks, but as of right now, it feels like Mezzi needs to be that guy. And if you can lock that in, I mean, it feels like that's been one of the main talking points, if not the main talking point for this team for a while now, for good reason. So if you can figure that out, get some consistency there, I think that would be huge for this team.
And for me, both with Malik and Messi, it's a presence thing. Like, it's not just... I mean, we've seen these guys put up numbers. I've been really impressed with the assist numbers that Malik Monk has brought to the table so far this season. We know he's a microwave. He can get hot and put up a lot of points in a hurry when he needs to. But Malik and Mezzi's presence should be, and most of the time is the same every time they step on the floor, which is energy, hustle, effort that the team can respond to. And the fact that Mike Brown has to stagger minutes so much to have one of Fox or Sabonis on the floor at all times. It's not just these two guys coming in and providing energy for a second unit that's just supposed to tread water. They're providing energy that De'Aaron feeds off of. They're providing energy that Domantas Sabonis feeds off of, and maybe at times provides energy that takes the attention off the two of them, so even though they're on the floor, they can take some plays off and catch a breather and rest a little bit for a fourth quarter push. That's why I think De'Aaron's been so successful in fourth quarters, is because he's gone into fourth quarters not exhausted. So that presence off the bench, you notice it more on games like last night against, or the other night against Los Angeles, when you don't have it.
Absolutely. And, Domas has struggled with foul trouble throughout the course of this year. And it's felt like if he got in early foul trouble, it feels a little doomed almost. Like, it's just very worrisome. So to be able to have a big that can come in and fill that role and you feel okay about is big. And we saw it tonight with Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter got in some notable foul trouble tonight.
Very quickly.
That second half, I think he picked up his fourth pretty quick, and Coach had to go outside of his typical rotation. But what a luxury to be able to go to Malik Monk that you can throw out there and pretty much function the exact same way. Like, to have that type of guy off the bench is so important, not only for your bench production, but just as like a safety net in case your starters aren't getting it done or dealing with whatever troubles on any given night.
This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and the calories, you have to try Built products. We've got everything that you could want now after the holidays. I know that many of us are looking to maybe lose weight or put on more muscle or get more in shape here in 2023, but let's be honest, we don't want to give up the sweets. We don't want to give up the treats that we enjoy, and sometimes it feels like we have to in order to accomplish the goals that we want. Built makes it so we don't have to, whether it's the Built Bars, the Built Puffs, their granola bars. They have so many great things, delicious flavors covered in 100% chocolate. And here's the best part, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein in your average Built Bar. And now you don't just have to order on Built.com and wait for the boxes to be sent to you, although that's still a great option if you know what flavors you want. You can pick the exact flavors to be sent to you, build your own box. Now you can go to your local Walmart, go to your local Sam's Club, go to the pharmacy section and order yourself a box of Built Bars right now. You can try their great flavors like brownie batter and churro. Trust me, give them a try. You can thank me later. Well, speaking of luxury, and you know how high I am on this guy, Keegan Murray to me is a luxury for these Sacramento Kings on a nightly basis. And I know, and I've at least, I don't know about on the Kings Pulse side of things, but on Locked On Kings, I've seen a lot of comments and gone to a lot of conversations with people saying Keegan Murray's not ready to start. Keegan Murray shouldn't start. They should get maybe more like KZ out there for defense or this player out there. Or they should look for a starting four. Lauri Markkanen has been brought up and stuff like that. And I get it. But to me, games like tonight are perfect evidence for why the Sacramento Kings made the selection that they made with Keegan Murray. It's because he can have a game where he hits 5 3-pointers. He can have a game where he scores 15 points, all from beyond the three-point line. He only took one shot inside the three-point line, went 5 of 6 from deep. Like, he can have games like this naturally. You're not drawing up plays and sets for Keegan Murray. You're running your offense, and Keegan can almost poach on the perimeter because of the players that are out there with him. And he has such a good shot and he has such a natural ability that, to me, if Keegan improves as a defender overall, but especially a weak side defender, which Mike Brown talked a lot about before the game started, if Keegan can improve there, like he's a lock for a successful NBA career as an NBA starter for 15 plus years, just because of naturally what he can do.
The size, the shooting, the length that he has is just so valuable. I think HB is a perfect guy for him to look at and model his game after. I think the sort of night that we saw from Harrison tonight is something that Keegan is capable of. And I think it's just going to take getting more and more comfortable with the NBA. I think the adjustment to the NBA lifestyle is as big as anything for Keegan. Just somebody that seems to, be someone who likes to be around family. And my impression, especially from hearing that Kevin Herter podcast with Zach Lowe, is that Keegan never really went out much before or had explored much of the U.S. And
or
now
smiled.
Or smiled or tried any food. But now I think that that's an adjustment. And on the floor, like I think defensively has been the biggest area where it's just kind of been an adjustment period, which is to be expected from a rookie. But we've seen a lot of progress tonight in that Lakers game. You mentioned Coach Brown complimenting him a bit prior to tonight's game when it comes to that, and making progress on that end I think is going to be really important for him, because offensively it's just so effortless for him. Like you said, they're not running much through him. I think I looked the other day, somewhere upwards of 70% of his shots come off 0 dribbles.
Yeah.
It's just all within the flow of the offense, and he's so good at that. I think little things like on these DHOs with Domas, making sure that if a defender goes under, he stops early and makes sure that he makes it more difficult for him there. I think he's just such a naturally smart player. I make fun a little bit of his kind of monotone way that he goes about things, but I think being stoic like that and not getting too high, too low, or too emotional is a really important and valuable skill that he has as well. So I think that Keegan, for sure, is a long-time NBA starter. And if Harrison Barnes is not on the team at the end of this year, I think people are going to appreciate Keegan Murray a lot more.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, like two of the most stoic guys on the team, Davion and Keegan, are, I think, the two best at drawing charges. And that's been a skill that Davion showed off that didn't really surprise us necessarily, and he just keeps getting better at. And then Keegan, that's a skill that I did not know Keegan Murray had, and he's gotten a lot better at drawing charges and putting himself in the right position. But, Brenden, before we wrap up, unless there's anything else that you want to touch on from this game or the Kings in general, to me, like I've been emphasizing, to me, this is already a failed homestand because I gave the Kings one forgiven loss, and that was the loss to the Hawks. As soon as they dropped the game to the Lakers, even if they win out the rest of this homestand and go 3-2, yeah, it's positive. It's technically an improvement on where you were at the start of the homestand. But because you're at home, because of the strength of schedule, to me, it was a dropped opportunity. Regardless, like blowing out anybody in the league is not easy to do, regardless of how much the team struggles or how bad the team is. You have the Houston Rockets coming here these next 2 games. I'm not necessarily saying that I want the Kings to blow Houston out these next 2 nights. But what we saw tonight should be what we see in those 2 games.
It should be, especially on the defensive end. Sometimes shots are not going to fall at a certain rate. But I think that we saw earlier in the year, like to me, and the impression I got from Coach talking through after those Charlotte and Washington losses was that he felt like maybe they got complacent and just thought that they should just go out there and win these games because they're the better team, and that it doesn't matter if they make that layup because we're going to go get it right back on the other end. And I think being locked in on that end and making sure that, like, you don't look at tonight and say, okay, obviously we're just going to do that to the Rockets next game. No, you need to come out there, be locked in, and make sure that happens, because we've seen nights where maybe they come out a little passive or maybe think that they're going to just walk through winning those games, and it should be an easy one. And there's no easy nights in the NBA. That's what makes tonight so impressive, to blow out a team in the fashion that they did, and it being obvious that was going to happen from pretty early on, and never really having too much of a worry that Orlando was going to come back. Just extremely impressive, but it's got to keep going for these next ones, because I'm with you. I wish that they would have done more during this homestand. Already disappointed with the way that Lakers game and Atlanta game went, but hopefully you can make it up during a road stand where it looks a little difficult and you can steal 1 or 2. So still definitely can get it all back around, and they're doing all right in Western standings.
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, this is fun. This is fun. We should
appreciate you.
Yeah, we should do this more often. I'm curious how Locked On Kings listeners and Kings Pulse listeners liked it. I'm sure Locked On Kings appreciate not just hearing me rant for half an hour after a game. So it's a pleasure. Thank you for listening to Locked On Kings. Thank you for listening to thank you for listening to Kings Pulse. I almost called you Locked On Pulse, which let's just call it this.
Rebrand.
That's what this is. Locked On Pulse.
There we go.
I like it. Hopefully we'll be doing more like this. Appreciate you, Brenden, and this is a lot of fun. It's always easier, though. Always more fun to do it after Kings win.
Absolutely. I listened back to my Lakers pod, and I was a little upset at myself. I was like, maybe I was a little harsh. I don't do great about watching my language on my own podcast sometimes, and I think I was feeling pretty bad after that one. So very different energy tonight, and understandably so. It was a good win.
Man, that was a lot of fun having Brenden here with me for a Locked On Kings podcast post-game edition. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want more of that with more guests post-game, let me know. And, of course, go and check out the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden does amazing work over there. Appreciate your support. It's good to talk about a Sacramento Kings win. And on tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm expected to be joined by another guest, Jay Mars from Sacktown Sports 1140. He's been my friend for a while. He's been on the Locked On Kings podcast many times before. He's set to join me, so I hope you will join us for that. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.